welcome back to the Made for the Range podcast in San Diego here at True Temper's headquarters. We are actually right now in the shop of the warehouse. So behind us, they are finishing handcrafted shafts, which is super cool. So I've got Don Brown here with me. I'm going to let him introduce himself. So just talk about what you do at True Temper, but then also you've been here for a while. Yeah. So talk about kind of how you started here and maybe some of the like cool milestones that you've had as you've grown with True Temper.
Yeah. So my name is Don Brown. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Innovation for True Temper. So we're just a little past my 23rd year work anniversary. So I've been alive for 48 years, and 23 of those years have been working at True Temper. So it's the only job I've ever had at post college. So my entire real adult life has been spent at True Temper. So I started here as a design engineer, so was in grad school at UCSD working on a PhD, and I realized that focusing on the same tiny little thing 10 hours a day for the next 5 years just to make people at my high school reunion call me doctor was not a worthwhile use of my time.
Fair.
So back in the day, there was a website called monster.com where you would go to look for a job. And so put my resume on Monster on a Monday. I interviewed at True Temper on a Wednesday. Interviewed again on Thursday, told my advisor I wasn't coming back to grad school on Friday, and started working at True Temper on Monday. So
that's awesome. And did you have a golf interest before applying or no?
Yeah, I played a little bit of golf when I was in middle school, high school. My dad was a big golfer, used to try to take me out to play. That time it was a little bit of a slow game for me. I was, rather go as a big runner, but either play basketball or go running, do something else. But in college, I got more into it. Probably potentially because there was usually beer involved. My group of buddies that I played with, four of us had 5 golf bags. One of the golf bags was usually loaded down with, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 beers when we would start. And the rule was whoever lost the hole had to carry the golf bag, very heavy golf bag full of beer on the next hole. So
that's a pretty good deal, actually.
So then I worked as a greenskeeper, was my first job in golf at Park City Municipal Golf Course up in Park City, Utah, after my junior year of college. And then after my second junior year of college, I was an intern, kind of engineering intern for a small putter company up in Seattle called Optic Golf. That was working on some cool putters. So I helped do them some metallurgy and some other stuff for them. Then went to grad school actually to work on golf stuff. I was a professor over at UCSD who had ties to Callaway. And then when I decided that wasn't the route I wanted to go, I ended up here. And so I guess, I started working in the golf industry as a greenskeeper in 1996. So since then, I've been in the golf industry nonstop.
That's the year after I was born.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
This podcast can be over pretty quick.
Just you wait. No, that's a really cool history in it. So your title now is Marketing and Innovation.
Yes.
The marketing kind of speaks for itself. What do you describe as innovation as far as your role is concerned?
Innovation is when the marketing guy gets to come up with his own title and wants something that sounds cooler than engineering or R&D. So really where it comes from is I obviously started as an engineer, spent really almost 20 years at True Temper as the lead graphite shaft engineer. But as my career progressed, I got more involved in branding, more involved in marketing, both product naming, but also marketing stories, coming up with, here's the cool technology. How do we make it relate to the consumer, which is a hard thing a lot of times for an engineer to do. I was actually always a creative guy in school. Like in high school, I did graphic design. I, wrote short stories and fiction, but math and science come very easy to me, and math and science pay pretty well as coming out of college. So I went that route. So ended up winding my way back to the marketing side. And then I guess 5 years or so ago, the opportunity opened up for me to become the full-time golf marketing guy. But because of my experience still overseeing all the R&D, I just don't do any of the day-to-day engineering really anymore. We've got other engineers here that do that.
And do you, or have you, I guess, in all your time here, have you focused mostly on the graphite side and the steel side? Is it a different team, or is it just a different part of what you
it's a
oversee?
different. We have separate steel shaft engineers. And that factor is obviously separate from the graphite shaft factory. So graphite or our steel shaft engineers got even more time and experience at True Temper that I do doing steel shafts. So He's obviously very knowledgeable about steel golf shafts. Only real involvement there is kind of me more throwing ideas at him.
Sure.
But I don't know how to do the actual engineering side of the steel to make
Okay.
the product come to life. So it's more of just an idea guy when it comes to the steel side.
Well, and I've talked a lot recently too, because I'll get questions. Oh, there goes a training exercise.
Sound of freedom.
Yeah. Thank you. I've had a bunch of discussions lately, actually, with the idea of graphite iron shafts becoming so much more popular.
Yeah.
Same thing with putter shafts too.
Yeah.
Graphite putter shaft. I think in the next 4 years, I would say, we're probably going to start seeing stock graphite putter shafts in a lot of putters. Yeah. And to me, we've talked about this before. Like, if I'm going to nerd out about one part of the bag, it's shafts.
Yeah.
And the idea of how much control and how much creativity you have over a graphite product versus a steel product is extremely cool to me. Like, I've 2 years ago, whatever it was, we tried to hand roll a shaft. It didn't work out. I'll show pictures or something of that because it's hilarious. It didn't work out. But like the idea that you can change something as simple as the angle of the same flag you were already using, and it changes the structure and the EI of that shaft completely.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that's really cool to me. So how does that factor into what you do on a day-to-day? Like how the process of deciding, like, okay, we've had hazardous, let's say Gen 4 forever. Yeah. Eventually there'll be a Gen 5. So what is the catalyst of turning a Gen 5 product out, making it different enough, but keeping the same kind of structure that people understand? Like, what's that process?
Yeah, so a lot of times it's about, or obviously it's an iterative process. We're trying to make something better. So when we go from the original hazardous black to hazardous smoke, like it's not a completely different golf shaft. We're not going from, okay, this is a really stiff midsection to a soft midsection high spin shaft. Yeah. So like, for example, that particular jump was the original hazardous black had a pretty heavy tip section, a lot of really thick tip wall. And so we actually had OEM partners that were using it as stock, but their stock length was 45.5 or even closer to 46. And though that shaft would swing weight sometimes at D7, D8,
crazy swing weights,
high swing weights. And part of that's because we designed that shaft for tour first and then got this OEM interest. So going from the original black to hazardous smoke was, okay, we got to go take some of the material out of the tip section to make it more of a neutral balance shaft, but we have to preserve all the properties of a hazardous black shaft. So it's still got to be very stout, low torque, low spin. And so that was that. And every kind of generation, we kind of go with, okay, what's next? So as you alluded to, which you probably shouldn't have because it's not officially out yet, but we'll forgive you for that. If there was going to be a fifth generation.
Hold on. I believe I said there will probably be a fifth generation. I didn't say anything. You just said it. So now it's on you.
Yes. If there was going to be a fifth generation.
Hypothetically.
Hazardous black, hypothetically. Yeah. We'd be looking to improve on what there was in Gen 4. Sure. So that's always what we're trying to do is, okay, we know we've got a really good product. What can we do to make it a little bit better? What can we take advantage of material technology? Perhaps now, as we get more and more into, we have digital motion capture of the golfer's swing, and we learn something about how the golfer's swinging a hazardous black shaft that lets us know, hey, you know what? We can actually go back off the stiffness in the bottom third, or hey, we need to make it actually a little more rigid in the handle. So obviously there's more information all the time coming in terms of how golf shafts fit golfers. So we can go change the golf shaft to fit, kind of what the new information's brought us. So.
Sure. And you guys, as a company, obviously when we talk about iron shafts on the steel side, like that's a clear win across the board. Yeah. Just indefinitely. But for graphite, I think you guys have a presence in every OEM. Is that right now? Yeah. There's at least one option from True Temper in every OEM brand. Yeah. You guys do quite a bit of OEM work. Yeah. So one of the questions I get all the time is take something like hazardous black, right? Why is a shaft of that kind of profile made in a 5.5, right? I get that question all the time. Like, who swinging at 80 miles an hour would need a hazardous black? I know the answer to that, but can you talk through that real quick and how you take a profile like hazardous black, which is clearly made for tour level, higher swing speed, low launch, like that kind of stuff, but you adapt it into somebody, and why would that person need it? Because that's a question I get all the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, regardless of swing speed, you can still impart too much spin. Yeah. So that's the big thing. It's like low spin shaft, you could have an 80 mile an hour driver speed and still have too much spin. So that's really where it comes from. Now, if you take a hazardous black TX and a hazardous black 5.5, like a lot of times the torque's going to be a lot higher in the 5.5, and what a stiff tip shaft is at 5.5 versus it is in a TX are two different things. But if we go and took 500 golfers, we'd have slow swing speed guys that need less spin and high swing speed guys that probably need more spin. So there is a low spin or high spin option needed kind of across the swing speed range.
Yeah, it's the same question I get on the other end of that, of, you know, why are there some guys on tour that are swinging at 120, but they're playing a blue profile, or they put a red in their fairway wood or something like that. I'm like, it's just, if you ignore the model, make, color, whatever of a shaft, and you just hit what hits the best launch trajectory, like, that's all that matters. It doesn't affect the player just because a profile says what it is.
Yeah, well, and when you talk about drivers, there's an optimum number. Like if you were 120 mile or swing speed, your optimum number is 14.2 degrees and 2100, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
In a fairway wood, there's not an optimum number because what you want a 3-wood to do might be different than what I want a 3-wood to do. I'm trying to have a 3-wood, come out low, land fast, and run. Yeah. And you might have a 3-wood.
I'm the opposite. Yeah. I'm trying to launch it as high as I can.
I drive it a long way. I'm trying to launch it way up in the air and have it come down and land soft on a green. So the fact that we're doing different things means there's not an optimal fairway shaft for everybody's swing, because everybody's trying to get something to do something different with a fairway wood.
And then, so as you talk about different offerings, then, so we have Hazardous and Denali right now, are kind of the flagship graphite. So the difference, and I've told people, what I tell is there's a power category and there's a feel category for almost every brand that makes shafts right now. Everybody's got it. So when you talk about the difference between a Hazardous product and a Denali product, with both of them have a black and a blue product, how does it, do you get the feedback from tour guys, from OEMs, or is it just internally like, hey, we should really adapt into this feel product? Because Even Low hadn't been refreshed for a while. And then Denali, I know it's not a replacement necessarily for Even Flow, but it's kind of the new feel category for True Temper. So how does that discussion start? Like, did somebody here say, hey, we need to make a new feel product? Or was there feedback that came in that dictated that?
Sometimes, I mean, a lot of it's feedback. I mean, even think always, you know, it's aggressive tempo, hard at the top, or smooth tempo. And so if you're having somebody with a smooth tempo, but you give them a Hazardous black, they may get great numbers, and it'd be like, well, this thing feels like a telephone pole. I hate it. So that's really where it comes from, is there is the yin and the yang in the golf swing. And there's certainly a Venn diagram of, there's players that could use a Hazardous black or Denali black and be happy with both. And one's going to feel a little boardier, one's going to feel a little smoother, but they kind of sit in the middle. But the problem is when you get to the edges, you know, we've got, you know, some players out there that love a Hazardous T1100. And then they go try some of the product out there. There's even not ours, with a softer handle. And they may get great numbers and they go, I hate this thing. It feels awful. And so that just comes down to the feel thing, which you can't test on a robot. You can't give it to the robot and say, hey, how does this feel? You got to actually go out and do real player testing with that. And even that feedback is completely subjective.
Yeah. So I know you guys too, if we talk about tour presence really quick, you guys so Keenan's back there. Keenan and I became friends through a different job a couple years ago. I'm not. I like Keenan. I'm going to defend him right now. Love that guy. But so he has a pretty consistent presence on college stuff or lower tours, that kind of thing, which not everybody does. It's not an effort that everybody makes. So, you know, as we talk about the potential of Gen 5 or the Denali product that just came out, or the handcrafted stuff that we'll talk about in a second, how is that generation of golfers influencing what you guys are thinking about now and then into, you know, 2, 3, 4 years from now and what you're going to do with it?
Well, the one thing I'll say is, like, a lot of the guys that KP works with down on college, even out of AJGA, their ball speeds are just way higher even than what we see on PGA Tour. Like, the average kid out there is top 10 on PGA Tour in terms of ball speed. And so we have to just make things stiffer. Like, even if you talk about golfers now versus when I started, a Hazardous black 6.5 was way stiffer than a ProLite-X, and ProLite-X dominated the PGA Tour for a long time. So if you think about that, we had to make that shaft almost a full flex stiffer. We're hedging in that direction where the top end of the food chain for swing speed is going to get faster and faster, whereas the middle of the road golfer is not going to get any faster.
Okay, so if we made a bell curve for it, basically you're saying the top end of that curve is stretching out, while the meat of that is relatively going to stay the same. The meat of that's
staying relatively the same. You know, if you look at some of the USGA average driving distances for recreational golfers, that number's not really changing a ton. And then obviously the low end's not really getting any slower.
It's not getting lower.
But the top end is stretching out to where, you know, 10, 15 years ago, 185 mile an hour ball speed was mind blowing. And now it's like, all right, that's...
if you're not there, you're kind of...
If you're not there, and that's a lot of guys, like, that's their fairway finder.
Yes. So you guys also have several brands under the True parent company. So AeroTech is big into iron shafts. That's what Nelly Corda has in hers. So we're 5 tournaments in a row plus a major right now with those, which is sweet. But Accra specifically, so Accra also makes wood shafts. I'm not going to say they're competing wood shafts because I think Accra has their own unique way of doing what they do. But how does that factor in with Accra being now I guess they have the TaylorMade option for TZs, old TZs, but being a aftermarket only versus you guys having a very, very, very large OEM presence, how do those teams work together? And then how do those teams kind of differ in what their objectives are?
Yeah, I mean, the Accra product line is one very specific to club fitters. And so, Accra, from a total sales volume standpoint, is a fraction of what ProjectX is. And they probably have 5 times as many SKUs. So it's really about, if you go look at something like the GX line, where it's all the way from like a 40-gram double ladies all the way up to a 100-gram M5 plus M6. It covers a huge spectrum, so that's really what, that's what the club fitters need. If you're a club fitter,
absolutely,
you don't know you're going to have a 75-year-old grandmother come in, and then your next appointment's going to be an 18-year-old world beater high school kid, and you got to be able to fit all those people in between. And so they have to have this really wide variety. Whereas ProjectX line, we call it up the gut is what we call it a lot, especially when you're talking about off-the-shelf stuff. When you're going in and buying a driver at a retail store and not getting fit for it necessarily, that's what we call up the gut. So we really make a lot of the up the gut, and then we make the tour product. And we don't necessarily get into some of the fringes on the lower end, and that's where Accra really excels and works a lot with the fitter feedback, be it some of the bigger guys or even like the one-door brick and mortar guys.
I've seen
all
it.
have a sales rep they can talk to at Accra and be like, hey, Accra 40i is great, but when you guys do the next generation one, I still have some folks that even need a softer version of that. And so really focused on the club fitter that's spending a lot of time fitting somebody exactly to the right shaft as opposed to maybe in a big box store where we're going to get you in the right neighborhood.
I know, like I've seen it in action. I've had conversations between myself, Keenan, Jeff Lake from Accra, and then Brian LaRoche in Florida, who the 4 of us are friends at this point, and like we all chat about different things all the time. And I know that when the GX stuff came out, which was recent to this podcast, the Accra GX stuff, like Brian, I think he said he fit like 15 drivers in like 3 weeks into GX because it was so easy, because it's made for guys like Brian LaRoche who are fitting people every single day. Some people are also budget conscious, which that sort of stuff helps with because you have such a myriad of products. But it's really cool to see the differences, and I think people don't understand why that has to exist. Like why is there not a hazardous black on every single fitter's wall ever? Well, it's like, first off, it's such a large OEM business. You can pretty much get it in anything anyhow. And then secondly, like there's a whole division of this basically dedicated to that customer anyhow, where there's a little bit of separation there. And, guys like LaRoche, who was on the podcast a couple weeks ago, or I don't even know when this is getting posted before. We talked about that a little bit with the GX stuff. So it's super cool to differentiate.
Like your old employer who's got 120 doors. Hazardous Black is still their #1 selling graphite shaft from True Temper, just because it's got such omnipresent placement that people go in and they're like, I've been playing Hazardous
They know
Black.
it.
And
know
like,
it.
It's a little bit like with Hazardous now. We're almost to like the dynamic gold thing, where it's like, I play Hazardous Black. And when the next driver comes out, I play Hazardous Black. It's a little bit like that. Better players with their irons and wedges, like, no, I play X1 and S4. But I play X1
I was going to say,
and
you
S4.
walk into a golf store and you just ask some random person, right? And you just shout wedge shaft at them, and the first thing comes to their mind, 9 out of 10 times, they're going to go S400. Like just out of the top of their head. Even guys that don't play S400, like they're just going to say S400 because that's where everybody's at right now. And, with the dominance of dynamic gold and what ProjectX is doing, let's jump into that just really quick, and then we'll go back to graphite with some of the new stuff. But so like ProjectX Wedge came out last fall. Is that right? Yeah, last fall.
Maybe even longer ago than
so
that.
ProjectX has a S400 for ProjectX now, and there's still guys that are playing ProjectX irons, and they're putting S400s in. They're not even testing the ProjectX Wedge. How do you guys deal with that? Because obviously it doesn't hurt you one way or the other, but it's also like, it's probably better for those PX guys to play PX Wedge than it is the S400 product.
Well, I mean, except with your wedges, the one thing you just want with your wedges is to be confident. You don't want to ever be standing over a skinny little
and waiting.
50-yard pitch and be like, is this the right shaft? Man, I wish I had my S400. So, I mean, a lot of it's that. Once you're comfortable with something, we did want to give the consumer, though, because if you look at X1 irons, S4, that's what 80% of the better players out there are playing. And ProjectX was backwards, where you went softer in your wedges, you got 5 grams lighter, which is counterintuitive to what anybody who thinks about a golf swing would think. And so that's what we want to do with ProjectX wedge. Now, people will still want to use S4s and PX65s. Please, by all means.
Yeah. And
actually, I mean, I'd rather them play the ProjectX wedge because I think we charge a little bit more for that one, but you know.
And meanwhile, I put a Accra FXP 400 in my lob wedge the other day.
The putter shaft?
Yep. Yeah. And it works really well. Just going to let you know that.
For about probably another 5 weeks, and then you're going to be like, oh, man, what have I done?
Uh-oh. Well.
It's mad scientists and people who get golf shafts for free for personal use tend to do a lot more scientific experiments.
Yeah, I got to say, though, it feels really good. Yeah. It's nice. So
they either do more experiments or they break a lot more shafts. So or both of those.
I've never broken a shaft.
Oh.
Not a single I've never broken a shaft. I've built some bad shafts.
Okay.
I've had some stuff fly off.
Yeah.
But the shaft itself was always fine, except for if we end up hitting that shaft that I rolled, that's going to break. I think probably it might survive the first swing.
Second swing, just thrown that out as a liability concern.
Second swing, it's done.
Yeah, I don't break shafts anymore. I've gotten much stupider. I throw my shafts at stand bags and break the stand bag leg, and I can get quite a few free golf shafts as the VP of a golf shaft company. I don't get a lot of free stand bags.
Wait, hold on. Go back to that. You threw a club at your stand bag
and snapped the leg. Oh,
and you snapped the leg of the stand bag
half a dozen times at least. Yeah.
I don't know how to process that. The stand bag leg. Isn't it metal? No?
Well, they're metal, but when you have a wedge moving at a high rate of speed, and a lot of them now are graphite. Yeah.
Wow, that's a testament to the graphite.
A couple of them were on purpose, and a couple of them were just throwing the wedge angrily in the general direction of the bag and getting unlucky. So
yeah, I have a ProjectX. It's a 7.0 actually, believe it or not, that I angrily hit against a tree. So it looks like this now. No, I still have it. I'll have it forever because it reminds me to not get angry on the golf course, which doesn't work, but whatever. All right, so then moving into recent stuff. Really quick, since we're on iron shafts, Vector was announced yesterday, 2 days ago, whatever it was. So talk to us a little bit about that. I know nothing about it. Keenan didn't tell me it was coming because he's great at his job. Yeah. So talk to us about why that needed to happen. I know it's lightweight, only softer flexes. Yeah. So who's that product for? And why should somebody play that over a PX IO, for example, something like that?
Yeah, one is it's lighter. And again, we talk about everything being iterative. So obviously we've had great success through the years with a product like Elevate. I mean, Elevate is probably, when we talk about up the gut, like Elevate 85 and 95 is the heart of the gut. That is for steel shaft users that are, mid to high handicappers. They need a lightweight shaft that has got higher launch, higher spin. So it's like, all right, how can we improve upon what's already a great shaft? Sure. So one of the things we looked at is, okay, how can we make it a little easier to load in the R-Flex? Okay. And so in steel, it's not like graphite where you can go change the modulus of the material. Steel, modulus of steel is the modulus of steel is the modulus of steel. I don't care how you heat treat it. I don't care how you bend it. I don't care how you stretch it. The modulus of steel is always the same. Okay. So making the geometry smaller is the way that you can make that shaft easier to load. Okay. One of the other things that side benefits of that is, I don't know if you've ever accidentally put a junior grip on a golf club, becomes vastly easier to rotate said golf club and turn the club head over. So the R-Flex 580 butt, so it's easier to load, but also because it ends up with a smaller grip geometry, makes it easier to get the face back to the target line. So generally for your R-Flex golfer, not always, but generally they struggle with hitting a cut or a slice or a push cut or a push slice or a shank. Something going that direction. So for a right-hander.
So any little benefit you can give them is
making
helpful.
it a little easier to turn over, either starting it left of the target line, so when it does cuts back to the intended target line, and then easier to load and that's in the 80-gram range. Then for the S-Flex, we know that player needs a little bit firmer handle, doesn't have as much trouble getting the club face square, so the traditional 600 butt, and then at 90 grams, a little bit extra mass for a little more stability.
Okay, that's awesome. And is that going to be a stock line product, or is that going to be a Fitting Studios product?
Yes.
Both? Okay. Yeah. Which I figured that would be.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be kind of like Elevate was. I mean, it's going to be in a lot of places.
Okay, cool. And then our newest, I guess, I don't want to call it flagship necessarily because there's so many products at the top there, but Dynamic Gold Mid has been extremely successful since it came out. I know I've seen a bunch of people switch into it. I actually got fit for DG Mid by Wilson a month ago. And it's, to me, it's such a unique profile because I don't think people yet understand that like the mid truly does mean mid. It's not just another shaft label and like a small change. Like it's a good change to add, particularly spin. I think adding launch for a better player is easier because they can kind of manipulate stuff more, but that spin addition that it gives you, especially with every equipment, all the golf balls, everything getting so low spin, having that spin back in the game is really awesome. So what's the success of that product been like? Because I know that was another one that was kind of not an Elevate replacement, but like kind of filling in that gap in the meantime before other things could get developed with Elevate not leaving completely, but like just falling off a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the DG Mid was kind of started, and we've taken a couple swats at what I would call a DG Mid type product, but thought process always was when you're starting with the tour and the better player is like, okay, we want to make something that launches a little higher, spins a little more.
Yeah.
And generally that golfer would like or choose to have a little bit lighter shaft.
Sure.
So if you look at, we did Dynamic Gold High Launch, we did Elevate Tour, we've done a bunch of stuff at 120 grams. Well, as it turns out, tour players don't want 120 grams. If you go look at the Darrow survey, not only us, but even with the competitors, and you look between, on our side, ProjectX 6.5 or 7.0, 125 or heavier.
130,
Dynamic Gold in the 130s. Our competitor stuff, those poor saps that choose to use other product, they're all playing stuff that weighs 125 or heavier.
Yeah.
There is not a lot of tour presence in that 115 to 120 gram weight range. So when we did Dynamic Gold Mid, the first parts we did, like, don't fight everybody on the weight.
Sure.
Somebody wants a 130 gram shaft that launches more and spins more power to them.
Let them have it.
Take Dynamic Gold and make that at that weight, launch and spin a little bit more. So that's where Dynamic Gold Mid, the tour part, came from. And then everything coming off of that, going to a 115 and a 100. You know, we've got Dynamic Gold 120, spins just as little as the regular Dynamic Gold. We have even Dynamic Gold 95, which is still pretty stiff for a 95 gram shaft. So DG Mid 100 kind of filled in that gap. A little more launch, a little more spin. Funny thing is we had the whole thing like, all right, we just need a 130 gram mid spin shaft for tour. Nobody on tour plays 115.
Sure.
Now we got like 5 guys on tour
I was
using
say,
the 115.
then you got a big request for that 115.
Yeah, now we have a bunch of guys on tour using the 115. So, but then again, that just shows like it's taken that long. We started doing lighter weight stuff for PGA Tour players to start being like, hey, maybe I can benefit from, they're not going to 90, but maybe I can benefit from 115 grams to 120 grams.
And do you think there's any influence in the rise of graphite also bringing in the rise of lighter weight steel? Because guys don't want to switch to graphite, but they want to realize the benefits of that lighter weight product. Do you think those are somewhat correlated?
The rise of steel on PGA Tour is
graphite,
graphite. Sorry, and the PGA Tour is a little bit like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot.
Sure.
Yeah, people say they see it, but they don't.
Okay.
Like the number for graphite shafts on the PGA Tour now might be less than it was.
Yeah,
10 years ago. And when I started 23 years ago, it was like next year, next 5 years, half the tours gonna be playing graphite.
If you ask anybody, I think starting in 2018, let's say, from 2018 until now, if you ask somebody like when's the boom of graphite coming, they're like, oh, the next 5 years you're gonna see it. But people have been saying that since 2018. And you're saying they've been saying it since longer than that.
Since probably 1975 when the first graphite shafts came out. And not to say the graphite shafts aren't good, but when you get to that weight range, there's a couple of things. One, 130 grams of graphite tends to feel really dead. And you're talking about very good players who want to know if they've missed the ball off the center of the club by a millimeter.
Sure.
They want that feedback.
Okay.
The other thing is as great as graphite is, the material itself is not as consistent as steel. So like I was talking about a minute ago, when you take steel, the modulus of steel is the modulus of steel is the modulus of steel. I don't care what you alloy it with. I don't care what you do.
Okay.
If it is a plain carbon steel, the modulus is always the same because, not to nerd out, but it's the same crystal structure and all the other stuff you put in it just moves into the little holes in the crystal structure, but the crystal structure is the same.
All right.
We buy graphite. It has the fiber itself, the modulus of that, the stiffness of that has a variation. It's not like steel where it's the same every time. You're taking basically a polymer, stretching it out, and then heating it up to thousands and thousands of degrees to burn off all the other stuff. But the carbon atoms don't always align exactly perfectly when you do that. And so you end up with modulus variation. And then we take that fiber and we put it into pre-preg. A pre-preg is made up of fiber and resin.
Yeah.
And we talk about resin content or fiber content when we make that. Those both have a tolerance. So now you've got your carbon fiber has a variation in the modulus. And now one of your flags might be 90 FAW, 90 grams per square meter of carbon fiber.
Okay.
And the next one might be 92. And so now you're making graphite shafts and you've got a variation in your pre-preg where like, hey, we got the dead on spec carbon in the 4-iron, but we got the stuff that's a little bit on the light side in the 5-iron, and then we got the stiffer stuff in the 7-iron, and you get variation through your set. But then when you come back to do replacement and you're like, hey, new irons are out, I'm going to go and play the same graphite I got last time.
Yeah.
Well, now you have that variation still present in the raw material, and now like, well, the last time my 4-iron was on the soft side, but this time it's got the stiffer stuff.
Gotcha.
So you just don't get that consistency in the material. Now, if you want to talk about 95 grams, there are things we can't do at 95 grams with a steel shaft in terms of controlling launch and spin that we can do with a graphite shaft.
Okay.
And so there's benefits there. But if you're talking about a 130 gram tour part, there's just and it's not a ton of inconsistency, but there is, even if it's 5% inconsistency in the modulus of the material going to a graphite shaft at 130 grams, and there is a 0% modulus inconsistency in the steel shaft, the steel shaft's going to be more consistent, both shaft to shaft in your set and then over the duration of your career.
Okay.
And so that's why I don't think at the tour level you'll see that.
Yeah.
And graphite, it's perfect for a driver, where all you care about when you're hitting driver is you're like, I want to hit this thing as far as I can.
Yeah.
And if it's 10 yards longer on this shot, but a little 5 yards further right, you're fine.
Yeah.
If you're hitting a 7-iron, you want to hit it into a bucket.
Yeah, that's not fun.
Every single time. Like, hey, it went 10 yards longer. That's not good.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, I'm over the green. So, and obviously, if you think about this whole golf bag, you're just like, woods, especially driver, long and far. Irons, I want to hit them into the smallest possible bucket I can.
Sure.
Regardless if that's 150 or 155 yards, I want to know exactly where my 7-iron is going to land every time.
So you've been here for 23 years, and you've gone from, I'm just going to say, Graffaloy ProLaunch Blue to the brand new T1100 handcrafted. So in that amount of innovation or graphite research, whatever, you having been through all that and knowing the answers to those questions, how long do you genuinely think it might take for a 130 gram graphite part to be viable actually on tour?
A couple more of my career lifetimes.
Really?
I mean, it's viable. It's viable now. But your feed off you're going to have less feedback because vibration, graphite just naturally dampens vibration. It is.
Well, I'm saying like a 1-to-1. Like a guy could choose either one and be happy.
You're always going to have there's no way to make the graphite just because of the way you make the fiber and then the process of making pre-preg that you're ever going to have a 0% variation. And I'll put it to you this way. I've worked at True Temper for 23 years. I won't say I'm the best graphite shaft engineer in the history of the game, but I'm probably top 5.
You got a lot of shafts under your name.
I have never played a graphite iron shaft.
Really?
I take extreme pride in my design capabilities, and I have never played a graphite golf shaft.
Really? Wow, that's kind of crazy.
I can make my own. I can go make 100 of them and hand pick.
Yeah.
Every single one.
Yeah.
Never done it.
Wow. Okay, so now you talk about, there's a little bit of variability in that graphite product. There's a little bit of hand picking that could occur to batch them. So, by the way, guys, if you get a good builder, if you go to a good fitter, that supposed inconsistency in manufacturing is not going to affect your set because they do work on their end to make sure that's okay. It's the same thing that you guys do yourselves with tour issue. It's the same batching process. A good builder it doesn't change the product. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. It doesn't change the product. Your set will be fine. But I think that's a perfect segue into handcrafted, right? So the handcrafted series, we just released a new version T1100. So talk to me about what that means. I also want to go back a little bit. I think like the last yellow was extremely popular. Like that has a little cult following where I know people are looking for those on eBay. Literally, they have watch lists on eBay every day for a yellow. So talk to us about that process. Also, I got to film with Larry a little bit. I also, again, we talked about earlier, I got to try to roll one. Didn't work. There's a reason why somebody who's been doing it longer than I've been alive is doing it and not just a random schmuck.
Almost as long as I've been alive. He's literally been doing that for over 40.
He said 78, so we got to throw him like a giant party in 2028. There's going to be a Larry appreciation party that everybody is invited to. But what's the story behind that? Why does Handcrafted exist? How is Handcrafted different from a production standpoint?
Yeah.
And then for you, as somebody who's been through several iterations of Handcrafted, you started Handcrafted? I would imagine you started Handcrafted. Okay, so you started Handcrafted, and now what does the product mean to you as far as the impact on the industry that product has?
Yeah, one is when you talk about the handcrafted side of things. One, it's being made here in our facility.
Yeah.
So we've
literally
got
right there.
Yeah, right there.
Right there.
We've got Larry, who's Larry who's been here almost as long as I've been alive.
Yeah.
He's like McDonald's. It's not the 10 billion served, but he's somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60,000 golf shafts rolled in his lifetime.
That's insane.
But we also, our other techs that are here are all 20 plus year veterans. The guy who's running this started in our old factory in El Cajon 30 years ago, just as a hourly employee. And then he ends up, eventually becoming the lead and the factory supervisor. So ton of expertise. The other thing is you talk about the speed at which we do things. Like if I take a 2-man team in my facility, mass production facility, their target is somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 or 600 shafts a day.
Okay.
My 2-man team here does about 60.
Wow.
So it is a very much slower process. So we're making sure that, we put the flags on the mandrel, like when you learn when you roll, there's placement around the mandrel, not only up and down, but also around, making sure that the flags are exactly where they're supposed to be going around. And
so, the top has those what
we call clocking.
Yeah.
So this needs to be at the one spot. It's going to be at the one. In mass production, it's going to be like the one plus or minus a quarter. So,
fair.
It's just a level of precision because we're taking it much slower to do that. We obviously had a lot of success last time.
Yeah.
And actually part of the problem we had with it last time is it got too big. We got to where the demand got so high and we had such a big, every single product was handcrafted. We had even flow red 45 ladies flex and handcrafted to T1100s. And it just got too hard to manage with a small team.
Yeah.
Being like, hey, make 5 of these today and then make 10 of those. And they're having to move material around and cut new material just too hard. So, and then we had so much demand that people were having to wait 6-8 weeks to get a shaft. And so if you go in and spend $150 to get fit into your driver, and then you spend $600 on a driver, and you spend $400 on the upcharge shaft, and you're a $1,200 driver, and then you go, oh, by the way, you got fit in May, you're going to get this with 3 weeks left in your golf season. Nobody's going to want to do that. So we had to kind of shut it down and rethink how we're doing that. So we're not going to do the same thing we did before where every single SKU is available that way. Right now we're focused on T1100. There'll probably be a few other products, maybe some limited edition stuff, but it's not going to be before where every single thing was handcrafted. And we went from, okay, we're running one cutting and rolling team 5 days a week to by the end of it, we were running, I think at the very end, I think our team came in and worked, they were doing 13 on, 1 off for the last probably 8 weeks. Oh. And so it was just, and we're killing the people. It was just too much.
Yeah.
And so had to kind of shut it down, reset, and figure out a way to keep doing it and make high-end products for the consumer that appreciates that, but in a way that we could, honor both, the traditional handcrafted and make good product without making people have to work 13 tens in a row.
Yeah. Okay, so then focusing on the new T1100.
Yep.
So talk to us about what the profile is, and then a question I've gotten a lot is how does T1100 differ from just standard hazardous black, and then how does T11 differ than Hulk? Because I think that's somewhat cosmetically, I think people have that visual in their brains. So it's one of those questions of do I need this? Do I not? Is it something I should put in my driver? I'm playing Hulk right now. Should I get a T1100? So just talk us through those two comparisons and then also just the profile of T1100.
Yeah, so technically Hulk is hazardous smoke green. We just call it Hulk because it's green with the yes. We don't actually officially call it Hulk, Marvel. It's just, other people have nicknamed it the Hulk.
But the Hulk...
True Temper Sports does not call it
It is weird, though, because RDX Smoke Green didn't get the Hulk nomenclature.
Yeah.
Which was weird.
Because it didn't, the Hulk nomenclature that other people gave it was because it was green and blue at the bottom. So if you're not old enough. But those of us that watched the original Hulk, Lou Ferrigno, when he turned into the Hulk, was wearing the blue jeans.
It's like blue, purplish.
With the green top. And so that's where the Hulk thing came from. But, the original T1100 was hazardous green. We called it. And then Hulk was a hazardous green. RDX green was obviously a hazardous green. So T1100 is, the new handcrafted one, is a hazardous green. And so those are all, again, iterative products where we're trying to make it better. So the big thing with the new T1100 has what we call optimized carbon. So you're using a flat weave spread toe, some people call it, on the outside of the shaft.
Yeah.
What's different about the spread toe we're using is most spread toe is standard modulus. So, and we use that material a lot, great material, but it's 33 MSI or 24 ton or whichever system of units you care to measure modulus in.
Sure.
The weave we're using is actually a higher modulus. So it's about a 33% stiffer modulus, which means when we put it on that shaft in a torsional application, we're getting more torsional reduction for the same mass that you would get from a over what you would get from a standard weave. So we've basically taken a T1100 and we've now wrapped it in this higher modulus torsional weave on the outside. So we've just made an unbelievably stable 60-gram golf shaft.
Okay.
But this is not for the faint of heart. You know, we talked about the 185 guys. You know, that this is who that's for.
Yeah.
There doesn't even a TX doesn't even exist in the T1100 because there isn't anybody that would.
6.5 is plenty.
Yeah. The 6.5 is more than enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The new T1100 that's visible too, right? That.
Yeah. So we put what we call a ghost chrome over top of it. So it's got this kind of silver chrome finish, but it's translucent.
Yeah.
So when you really look at the shaft, you can see the weave.
Yeah.
But when you're at the playing address,
full length.
Full length.
Yeah.
Full length weave. When you see it down at at address, you don't necessarily see the weave and have any kind of distraction points.
Cool. That's awesome. So then just that last comparison, how does that compare to Hazardous Black?
So the original kind of design brief for T1100 was Hazardous Black on steroids.
Okay.
So it is a lower spin, lower torque, stiffer than a Hazardous Black. So that is, for us, you know, you got black is low, T1100 green, whatever you want to call it, is the extra low. It is the ultimate spin killer.
More lower. Yeah,
more lower. Yeah.
All right, I love that. Cool. Yeah, so then just, I think wrapping up, give a little bit of insight maybe to how True Temper has evolved in, like, let's say just the last decade since you've been here through it and you were here the decade before. I think it's cool to be able to talk to people that have been somewhere for so long that have that insight. And I'm sure that you also have thoughts on where the next decade might go and what product True Temper might be able to specialize in the future. So just give us a little bit of insight, just from your own perspective, not from like what you know is coming or what product specifically, but just kind of where you see just shafts in general going and how True Temper is gonna ride that roller coaster.
Yeah, you know, I think just from our side, you know, even the last, I guess, 5 or so years, we've added the AeroTech steel fiber product line and we've added the Accra product line. So the steel fiber one, we added it and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And so we haven't really, you know, that product's made in a factory overseas. We haven't really gotten a chance to go get our mitts really into the steel fiber product yet. So our new director of composites engineering is actually getting on a plane on Friday to go over there and kind of get our first dig into that. We already have one pretty exciting new steel fiber product coming.
Sweet.
But now that we can go see this and our engineers can go see it, you know, we don't do filament winding anywhere else at True Temper. So there's a process stuff we can learn there, and then we can take advantage of what we learn to then go back and design better filament wound products. So that's on the steel fiber side.
Super cool.
On the Accra side, Accra's obviously made great product for a lot of years, but they were always working with a contract manufacturing facility over in Asia who makes really good product. But when they wanted to design something, it'd be like, all right, we liked the FX 1.0 350 M3, but can we try making it a little bit different? And then tell them that, and then 3 weeks later you get a sample, and then you go back.
Process feedback,
Now they've got one of the world's leading graphite shaft R&D facilities who can do that stuff for them. So when they want to try something new, they can send that here, even graphically, where before they'd have to wait 3-4 weeks to get a new graphic done. They can work with us. We do all our prototype graphics right here in-house. So things like the GX, those graphics were all developed here in this facility. So it gives them access both from a shaft design standpoint, but also a cosmetic standpoint to do some things that they weren't able to do before.
Okay, that's sweet. I obviously, you know, True Temper is such a dominant name in golf. I think Dynamic Gold is one of those funny things because it's kind of like Tiger's world #1 record. Yeah. Like for anybody else to catch up to Dynamic Gold wins ever, like Dynamic Gold would have to, like, every single shaft in the world would have to fall in the ocean or something. Yeah. For anybody to have a chance, and it would have to stay in the ocein for like 6 years, or maybe more.
Well,
so
I mean,
it's a crazy run.
From our end, the number 2 competitor to Dynamic Gold is ProjectX. So we're sitting in a pretty good spot. right now through whatever, we're at 18 events this year on the PGA Tour. Tell me how many events, how many winners did not have a single True Temper shaft in their bag?
Did not have a single one?
Yeah.
I would say 0.
2.
It's 2?
2 guys. So we've won every event.
I'm trying to think who won. Because Rory, Scotty. Oh, I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well.
But
so,
I mean that's a pretty good number. 16 out of 18 wins is pretty good. We're still averaging 80+% of the field every week plays a True Temper product. Yeah. And Dynamic Gold is it's the workhorse. And it's funny that we talk to juniors all the time or and their parents and they're like, oh, what shafts do my kids get playing? And kind of for the really good player, it's get your kid an X100 as fast as you can and then never let him change. Because, I mean, and you can't argue with history.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not Tiger. There are a lot of guys before Tiger, even before it was Dynamic Gold. Yeah. When it was just Dynamic. Yeah. That were winning major golf tournaments with Dynamic 60, 70 years ago. Yeah. So
I remember Barath. Ryan found a, I don't remember what the catalog was, but he found like an old American Steel ad. Yeah. It was like a 50s ad, I think, for American Steel with Dynamic. And it was super cool. Like we saw this ad and it was about playing it and like at that time they were already marketing like tour wins and this is what the best players in the world use. Like, and now we're sitting here 70. No, that's too many years. No. 70 years later, and it's the same story. It sells itself. Yeah, so I mean, before Dynamic Gold, there was Dynamic, which was the same shaft structure, just not with the weight sorting and everything we've done, and obviously we've got better manufacturing. Sure. So since the 40s, so tighter tolerances and things like that. Sure. So awesome. Well, cool, man. Thanks for sitting down. Cool. I appreciate it. I'm excited about Handcrafted. Obviously, by the time this comes out, there's a really funny video that we did. Don tried to melt me and then tried to freeze me in a 15-minute period of time for this video, which was hilarious. But no, the handcrafted stuff's really awesome. You guys I like that the graphite presence on tour is growing. Yeah. Obviously, the steel presence is as solid as it's ever been. It's always cool to come here and visit. They've got, like he said, their prototyping is literally right here. They've got a whole graphics booth and a paint booth right here. That's where they can do all the limited edition stuff, like the one that had the mugs on it or the holiday stuff or the giveaway stuff, whatever the case may be. So super cool facility here. I always love and appreciate coming to visit. I've learned a bunch of stuff from you. I learned stuff today again, so I appreciate that. And you guys also, when I left where I was and started to do this, you guys supported immediately. So I thank you for that. Obviously, it's been a big help for Made for the Range to get there and to be able to do stuff like this. And I'm excited about it. I enjoy being with the team here, and you especially. I have an immense amount of respect for what you've done in the golf industry. We could have talked for 4 hours here. Easy, but he's also very nice when I bug him or make fun of him a little bit. But True Temper, obviously, it's a partnership that I love, right? And it's something I'll always appreciate, I'll always have, and I can't wait to see what we're able to do moving forward, and I appreciate that immensely from you guys. I appreciate that. I can't wait to see if you're able to get me one of those hats. It'd be nice to get one. Well, yeah. You're gonna get one of my hats soon. Okay. Well, as of the filming of this video, my hats are like at my house, I think. Oh, excellent. So I guess if I can't get a hat that I pay for out of my marketing budget from Keenan, somebody else can at least give me a hat. You can ask. Well, actually, he did nothing. Yeah. She did it. Oh, okay. Yeah. That the person who was like, "Hey, I've got you hats. I've got this locked down." Yeah. Georgia. Yeah, so let's give a little credit there where it's due, because Keenan is a different beast. Her microphone operation questionable. Well, hat giving out. They're all still working right now, though, right? The bars we're still jumping. Yeah, see, we're great. There we go. So, but no, thank you again for joining me. I think it was an awesome talk. People are gonna love it. So, we'll move forward. I'm sure in like 6 months we'll sit down and talk again. Awesome. Cool. Thanks Jake. Yep. Yeah.